Well, we celebrate the Feast of Pentecost, which originally is a Jewish feast, 50 days after Passover. And as the New Testament says, the day of Pentecost, they were all gathered together. And that's when the Spirit came down with the rushing wind, as we see in the description in Acts, with the tongues of fire. For them, it commemorates the giving of the law on Sinai with the clouds and the fire and the trumpet blasts. So there's a lot of action involved here. In the coming of the Spirit. Now, if you look at the actual images that are used most often for the Spirit, like the fire, for example, or the wind, as I've just said, or the one that comes through in the Vigil Gospel today about the rivers of living water flowing, which comes up also in Ezekiel and other passages, we get an idea of how the Spirit works. Because if you look at each of those symbols, water, wind, and fire, they're polyvalent. Let's say that they have double meanings. All of them give life, and all of them destroy. So obviously, water quenches thirst and makes plants grow, but it also floods and drowns. It's part of the imagery of baptism, that we're drowned and die with Christ and we rise up again. If you look at fire, it's the same thing. Of course, it can warm and heat our food and the sun in the sky, but it can also, of course, burn us up to a crisp. And if you look at wind, obviously the same thing. The breeze is the air that we breathe, but it becomes a hurricane. Same thing with the Spirit. I think we have to realize that the Spirit is the vitality of God, the energy of God, the power of God. And it's the actual energy of love between the Father and the Son. And the manifestation in creation is of that kind of energy. So which gives life. Come, Creator Spirit. Send forth your Spirit there, created, renew the face of the earth. But it also destroys. Renew the face of the earth. Change what's outdated and bring what's new. So there's a destructive and a creative power of the Spirit. And we usually don't focus sufficiently on the destructive part because we'd rather things stay as they are. Certainly in the church, that's true, but even in the country or, just human nature, our egoic nature doesn't like change, keep things the way they are. So we don't want to let the Spirit in too much. It might become a driving wind or a destructive fire, or a flood. And that's what we'd rather not face. But if the Spirit really is going to renew the face of the earth, if it's going to be all creation groaning in labor pains, it's going to be painful at the same time, bringing forth new birth, giving new birth to, the church, but constantly new birth to us, personally, and to the church. If it's going to bring new life, it's going to, get our corpses, full of new breath and new life, as we see in the first reading from Ezekiel today. But the corpse has to be there first. Think of the imagery of the butterfly. The caterpillar, as we now know, literally dissolves, ceases to be, and yet a whole new life comes from what's latent within it, which is the Spirit at work deep within. That butterfly image, which is used by St. Teresa of Jesus and many as a symbol for our transformation. So we have to expect to leave behind the caterpillar, leave behind what we were before, consent to the destruction, and meet the new life that's brought to us. It's very similar, if I may say, to the third member of the Hindu Trinity, Shiva. Shiva, who is the great dance of life, which involves destruction and creation, as is attributed to Shiva. But it's the same kind of function, very similar, of the Holy Spirit, of destruction and creation, because it's the very energy and transforming energy of God. But how does the destruction work with the Spirit? Now, externally, with fires and hurricanes and floods, of course, it can be very violent, destructive in a very disturbing way, a violent way. And that's not how the Spirit transforms, certainly not in my experience. And I think if we look at it more closely, we can see how it works. In fact, the very image that's used today, the rivers of living water, St. John of the Cross in his spiritual canticle has a stanza where he speaks about rios sonorosos, the raging rivers that are loud, the voice of many waters, as the scriptures say in the book of Revelation. It sounds like the voice of many waters, and that's a little scary, to sweep us away. And the torrents, as John of the Cross says, do sweep us away, sweep us off our feet. That's a good thing. But we don't want to be drowned, we want to be destroyed. And he explains in his commentary that the voice, the sound of many waters, lest we interpret that as being, frightening or violent, actually is described in the next verse in chapter 14 of Revelation, for example, as the voice of many harpists playing their harps. So it's a very beautiful thing. It's a whole symphony that's created by God's transforming action and the action of the Spirit. A whole symphony within our own being, the whole symphony within the church, the whole symphony within all of creation as things come to new birth. So I think the way, at least in my own experience, there have been several times in my life when my life has been completely turned upside down. A whole new way of thinking and a whole way of living, new way of being, several times in my life as I changed orders and all sorts of things. And I always experienced it this way. There was a whole thing that was being destroyed and left behind. But the way the Spirit works in its infinite delicacy and love and compassion and tenderness is that it so fills you with the whole fullness of new vision and new life. It carries you on its wings, the whole the wings of the dove, carrying you to a whole life which just fills your heart and fills your vision with your soul with a whole new experience. And the old just falls away. You don't even have to destroy it. It just falls away and disappears. So whatever the violence that can happen to us in the external world, in the internal world there is not violence. The Spirit is never violent in our inner world. The Spirit may destroy, but it destroys by giving new life. The dry bones just left behind their dryness and were filled with new life. And that's what we experience. So I think that's really important to realize. The Spirit does destroy, does make us move on, does take away the breath, they perish, they return to the dust, and the old self and the old ways of being. As we're led ever more into new levels of truth, the Spirit will lead you into all the truth. You cannot bear it now, but the Holy Spirit will teach you all things. So we have to expect and desire that things will be destroyed in the church, in our own life, in the world. But if it's truly the Spirit at work, the new vision and the new life will be so overwhelmingly attractive and vital and sweeping that won't even look behind. Don't even turn around to become a pillar of salt. Don't even look at what's left behind, because it just drops off. If only we lived that way more in the church. If only we lived that way more in our own lives. Stop clinging to the past, the old ways of seeing things and doing things, to traditions which are all too human almost all the time. Where is the Spirit leading? What butterflies are in the cocoon? What immense things are we being led to? We know how much more fantastic the external universe is than we thought, a couple hundred years ago or even 50 years ago. Why can't we think the same of our inner world? It's so much more vast and magnificent than we imagined. But we have to stop clinging out of fear and defensiveness and whatever to what's moribund, what's meant to pass, so that we can cling to, not cling. Let the Lord cling, take us up. We don't grasp God. God grasps us and takes us on eagle's wings. Kind of like Frodo at the end of the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the King. So that we can the final version, the Return of the King. So that we're actually carried on the wings of the Spirit to a whole new world, a whole new way of life. And if we let that happen, it's just so exhilarating and so consoling. The consoler, the Paraclete, is there. So expect to have your life turned upside down any number of times, but be eager for it. Pray for it. Lord, show me the things that I'm too afraid to see. Show me my life in a way that I'm too afraid to dream. And He will, much to your delight and unexpected joy.